Did you send that over in, Slack? Yeah, book club. Okay. Is this document just kind of a prompt for our conversation, or should we all respond?
So my initial questions here are that basically what I'm going to use to prompt the conversation, but
Okay.
you can also just go down to the bottom and start your own little notes section if you'd like. Grab my laptop charger real fast. Just give anyone else who wants to join a couple more minutes to funnel in here.
Yeah, the book clubs really weed out the people that are, I don't know, it takes a commitment to, read a book and then hop on and talk about it. I kind of struggled with this one a little bit. Like some of these business books, I call them big books about little ideas. And this had some very good ideas, but it was a little fluffy in my opinion. I see one of your first questions is ratings of the book. So I might have spoiler alert. I think it's a little fluffy. But.
Yeah, I would say I feel lucky because I basically started the event when I was already halfway through the book.
So did you suggest the book, or was that a happy accident?
Yeah, so I was reading the book for doing work because I'm building an app right now. It's going to be a part of the conversation, but I was already reading it, and I basically just went into the chat and I was like, "Hey, has anyone read Hooked? Any thoughts on it?" And then the chat sprung from there. Hey, Nick.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Colin, you might want to wait to describe it, but I am curious to hear about what you're building. If you're able to share. If you're not able or interested in sharing right now, that's fine too. So
I am able to share. So hopefully we will get to that. Let's see if there's anyone I need to ping. I think we're just missing John right now. Oh, and here he is.
Howdy.
Hello, hello. I think this is everyone.
Sorry to be late.
All good. Oh, and now I'm getting a phone call. Lordy. Okay, so let's just jump right in, I guess. And we'll start out with my first easy question. What did everyone think of the book?
Colin, are you emceeing this thing? Are you going to call on us, or what do you want to do with that?
I mean, do you want me to call on people? You can. I was thinking you could just go when you want to go, but
all right, I'll go. I'll get it out there. I'll break the ice. I thought it was a little fluffy. Couple of good, solid ideas, but I think I mentioned earlier before John got on the call, I put this one in the category of big books about little ideas. So I got about 3/4 of the way through, and at that point, I felt like I understood what he was trying to say. Um, I I have read a lot of it. Seems like psychology 101 kind of stuff. So if for anybody that had any psychology reading, I can see how it would be really, really informative. But good book, though. I definitely recommend it. And I don't know if anybody watched that short 30-minute video I put on the Slack, but that also is a really good summary if you're not got the attention span. So I'd say probably 3.5 out of 5 stars.
I'll go next. I kind of had some of that vibe too, but at the same time thought that it was a book that could have been shorter, but a book nevertheless with lots of good points that I think I'll take away. Some of them don't. I mean, every sentence in the book, I was thinking through like how would this apply to Penny University, because we're trying to build a platform here that is engaging and habit forming in a good way. And so every morsel of the book kind of went through that lens. And some of it, I thought to myself, but we can't make this platform into a game. And some of his advice leaned towards that. But at the same time, there's other constructs like the fog model and the notion of like triggers and action, reward, investment. So like stuff like that. I've made some notes in our document here that I think will lend themselves well to Penny University. So I liked it overall.
Yeah, I had some of the same sentiments that you guys already voiced. One part I specifically liked about it was just like the actions that he kind of set up at the end of the chapters and the questions that he would ask. Some of those things like asking, I just wrote down some of the questions like what exactly the problem is that you're trying to solve, and then like what specific user behavior do you want to turn into a habit, and how does that habit loop work specifically within the context of your application. And so kind of like building a framework around those things was helpful for me.
I guess I'm last. I'll go. But I had similar thoughts to everybody else. It sort of felt like the Psychology 101. Kind of, I don't know, most of it was pretty intuitive. I think the two ideas that I'll come away with was similar to what Nick was saying, but also like the last chapter talking about asking, I don't know if it's the last chapter, but asking about like the 5 whys and really figuring out why or what actions prompt somebody to take an action. And the forgot exactly what it was called, but the matrix of the 4 types of developers, or not developers, but product designers, I guess, and figuring out why exactly you want to ship your product and how it's going to improve the person that's using it. So I think those are the 2 things I'm going to take out of it. But yeah, I think it was for me, it wasn't too long, but that's also probably because I like sped through it using an audiobook and got through it in like 3 hours. But yeah.
Yeah, I read it through an audiobook too, and I will say it was one of those books where it's like easy to, if you're listening to it through an audiobook, to just like go numb basically and like not really pay attention fully. But you can also gather the information, and when he hits the do this now parts, I think that's one of the best ways I've like seen one of these books sort of pull you in, because you might not pay attention for most of it. And then it's like, okay, recall all this information and actually put it into use. So I think just going through the do this now was like the most insightful thing ever. And similar to what George said, I do think there was a lot of fluff pieces that could have been done without, but overall it was good. So
we can blame his publisher for that.
Yeah. Could have done with a little more editing there, but so my second question was, for those of you that aren't sort of building products, like John connected to Penny University, but Do you think that reading this book has changed the way that you're seeing these products that use these habit forming technologies, like your social media apps, the games that you're playing, any app that you use on your phone, basically? This is giving you a new lens to look through.
I guess
I
I'll kick
feel-
it off. Oh,
Go for it. No, go
ahead.
for it, George.
Okay, sorry about that. I keep my phone on grayscale and try to fight back against some of the technology trying to take my attention away, which I guess this made me realize it is a little more pervasive than even I thought. It's something as simple as an inbox can really be gamified in these very clever little ways. And I found myself reaching for my phone, and I'd just being more aware of it after reading this book. But interestingly, I don't play a lot of games, but the few that I have played, in the context of social media, some of these techniques seem a little bit mischievous, but in games, it almost seems positive or helpful. It's like the game, right when you need help or you're stuck, some of these things can come in, and I think they improve the way games work, but some of these techniques applied to social media and other things I find I'm suspicious of. So it did make me more mindful overall of how, especially how much time and effort some of these companies put into understanding these things. Some companies are much, much better at it than others, and it really shows. It was so good that I didn't even notice it, even unless I was really focusing on it. So definitely made me more aware.
I think that gets at the entire chapter. I appreciated, where it's like, now since you realize that people are manipulating you and that you can manipulate people, should you do it? Because what was the quote? Something about any really useful tool can be effectively a weapon. So, and if it can't be a weapon, then it's probably not even a useful tool. So just how you wield the thing. And so that makes me think in that chapter about ethics, it's like, could I recommend that people use Penny University, and would I use it myself? There's two questions. Is that the two questions? I feel like I kind of got that wrong. But I think Penny University goes in the category of I would recommend to other people to use it, and I would use it myself. As far as just being more aware of the stuff around me that's playing this trick on me, and then I'm letting it play this trick on me, that little red dot on your icons on your phone, total trigger for me. Total, what was the thing? Trigger, action, reward, investment. Seeing a little red dot knows that waiting on the other side of my click is social interaction and a variable reward of I might find information that's interesting. Not always though. And it's got me. So it's like, I actually have to, I get grumpy when I find those little dots and like, but I feel like I should do this, but I know consciously that it's a waste of time. And there's like two parts to me.
I wonder if it gets less tempting the more you resist, but it's the same color red. I told you about the grayscale. Every time I turn my color on, I notice red, the same exact hue in all the apps. But in the talk, John, I don't know if it was mentioned in the book, but he references GitHub as being particularly good at implementing some of this. I don't know if you see that. I know you're a part of that organization. If you see some of this being built in from a product standpoint at GitHub, but I don't use GitHub much, but that was one that he mentioned in his talk as being a particularly good example of creating a product that has a lot of hooks in it.
Yeah, I think we do. Though they tend to be useful. We try not to pull people back towards like garbage to train them that these hooks aren't useful.
Yeah, I'd say with GitHub, like just from my experience in using it, like it gets me using the product more, but like from a business perspective, if it's getting me to code more, then that's so helpful. But just like getting that email in my inbox saying like, oh, someone commented on your pull request or something like that.
Yeah.
That always roasts me into more interaction, more thinking, and it's always something positive.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Colin, because sometimes I've noticed a lot of companies will send you an email and they'll say something like that, but it's just fabricated. They'll say, there's X amount of people that are interested in your profile or something, and that's not true. They just say that to get you back. So I think that email letting you know people are engaging with you can be good or bad. I know some companies send that out and it's not true. It's like, they just want you back engaged with the platform. So
I think LinkedIn is the worst at that, where it's like, oh, you showed up in 120 searches this week. And it's like, no, I didn't.
Or like, I showed up.
You
Yeah,
have to
you might
search
have.
my exact name for me to show up. There's no way I showed up in 120 searches.
Well, or it could be bots looking through all possible name combinations. You could have showed up in a search result and been scraped off the page, and that's it. It might not be you.
Or showed up in like the 7th page of the search.
Yeah.
good point.
So no one actually looked. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that, like how you kind of balance this out, because so many of the platforms that are using this, it's like they want you to spend the maximum amount of time on their platform. And that's when it kind of becomes harmful. And so like, again, kind of thinking about it in the context of Penny U, I was like considering, how do you do this in like an ethical and balanced way? Because I want to kind of help people learn when they really want to. I don't want necessarily to people to just be constantly scrolling through things. Like, but maybe that's not the best business idea. So it's I don't know. It's a tricky thing to balance, I think.
I think the way that Colin just described GitHub as doing it as being kind of the ideal that I would like to shoot for with any university. It's like, we do keep people re-engaged and coming back and feeling the triggers. Like, I want to see, what's going on, but with ideally not to just mindlessly scroll like I would do on Twitter. That's one of the other big culprits of me. But to form value for themselves, to engage, create relationships, learn specific things that they can take away and use. And that will bring them onto the platform doing more and more and more stuff, but it's also, with every engagement, they take something away for themselves. So I think it can be done ethically, and everything can be copacetic.
Yeah, the ethics are complicated because like even just talking about this, like about product design in my own company, we have some people that are like super anti habit building products because they think when you're building a habit building product, you're building an addiction. And he even talks about in the book, he's like, there's a difference between habit and addiction, but there's a lot of companies that he also describes as being habit building that are also doing it very maliciously, like Facebook trying to rope you in with in-app purchases and stuff in their games. So you got to tread a fine line, it seems sometimes.
Maybe, Colin, maybe this would be a good time to mention a little bit about your company. You mentioned your company and your team. Can you tell us just the quick elevator pitch?
Yeah, so my company is working to we're building a habit building app to help people build better habits. So we're building an application that allows users to track their habits and communicate with other people building the same habits in order to have social accountability and better productivity habits.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. So the next question I had was, I just wanted to know if does anyone have any sort of lingering questions about the hooked model that he talked about, sort of like just basic, like how do you describe each step, anything like that, just like anything on the actual content of the book.
Well, what did you consider, what is the hook model? Because for me, he had several different directions of coming into the idea of habit building.
Is it the hooked model at its base is like the
trigger
action reward investment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's what you would say is the hooked model, but then you could also just describe it as any model that you would take to build habits, I guess, if you wanted to do a more open interpretation of it. Because even in those 4 points, it doesn't have to be those 4 points in order. You can take certain things out. You could say you need this action before you can get this trigger or something like that. You can do it there's probably infinite ways that you can take the hook model to your advantage.
Right.
Colin, are you thinking with your app and company kind of having that social proof be a part of the reward, or where do you think the social proof fits in the hook model? Is it the investment, or where do you think trying to build habits and having other people involved, how does that affect the process?
So there's a couple different points it falls under, and I think this is a good example of open interpretation, because you could say that chatting with other people and like showing them your progress is an action, but you could also say that it's an investment, that by creating these sort of bonds with other people, that's what keeps you coming back to the application. Or you could say it's a reward, because by building these habits, now I get social interaction. So there's a lot of different ways it could come in. And then I would also say that you could say it's a trigger, but there's also I would probably lean more towards saying like chat notifications and stuff are more of a trigger for that. And I think that in our case, the main triggers that we're going to go for in that case, we're going to have like notifications for chat messages occasionally. We're going to probably lean towards chat being more investment oriented. And we're also going to have a trigger for another reminder to say, hey, do your habits today. And that'll be a big one.
One thing that I was kind of curious about around the investment is like I guess the size of the investment and what makes it like the ideal kind of amount of work for somebody to put in to keep them invested, but also not have it be like too much effort. Like at Instagram is pretty easy. Like you post a picture, like that's a really simple thing to do.
So like basically what's the breaking point? Where does it lean into, hey, now you have this habit that you're going to come back to?
Yeah, I guess what is the correct amount of work for people to do to feel invested with that, and keeping it while also keeping it like very attainable, I guess, or manageable.
Yeah, because investment is a friction in many ways that can keep people from developing the habit that you might want them to develop. And interestingly, when they talk about investment of time, that could almost work against you. I know sometimes John mentioned Twitter. You spend 15, 20 minutes on Twitter, that investment of time almost works negatively. It's like, darn, I wasted 20 minutes of time. But
there's like the cognitive dissonance type of investment, which is purely psychological, and then there's a type of investment where you actually could hope to reap a future reward, which is a good investment. And so like for Twitter, when I'm going to it, it's like the more I interact with it, the more that, if you're familiar with cognitive dissonance, like, well, I've put this much time into it, I feel like I have made this investment, and it's kind of like a little lie we tell around psychology. It must be useful because I've spent so much freaking time there. Where it is, and I think you can actually succeed by making your users make that type of investment to an extent, but it's not the ideal. You really want to be providing them some value back. So I think with social network type applications, if you can help, and again, seeing through the same Penny University lens, if you can help people build real relationships and learn real things, then like the investments in Penny University will be represented as the list of all the chats you've been involved with, and the list of all the people that you've called on and that you can call back out to. And it does feel like a positive investment, because you can cash out on pieces of that every once in a while. So two types of investment.
Yeah, I think that Twitter is also a great example of variable reward, because, and he talks about this in the book, he says user-generated content is always an example of variable reward, but I think Twitter does exceptionally, because when you open up Twitter, you really never know what you're going to get. Like when you open up something like YouTube, right? You've gotten into like the recognition of, okay, my recommended is going to be XYZ videos probably on this topic, because that's what it's always been. But then when you open Twitter, it's basically just like you have to think of, you can't really think about like, what are the 150 people I'm following thinking about today and tweeting about? So I think that's what ropes me in, at least, is thinking, what is actually going on in people's minds today? And let's figure out what that is, and let's read it.
Yes. I feel that variable reward too. I have not enjoyed what's been in people's minds for the past few weeks, but it's yeah.
And to answer the question more of like what's a good investment, I think it's different for every application, but for something like Twitter, I mean, you could say that even just following like the first 10 people that you follow would be an investment in Twitter, because that's you making a conscious effort to say, hey, I want to see what these people are saying and doing, and then you're going to come back to see that. And then you could say that that's the same for like any social media. Or you could say like, I like a post, well, now I want to see similar things, so let's go in and see what else it can show me.
Is there any sense of accruing an investment based on what other people in the network do? So, for example, if a competing Twitter jumped on the market right now, and he even mentioned this in the book, if the competing Twitter jumped in the market right now and was even had a better experience and faster, and who would go to it? Because my investment in Twitter right now is from people following me, and I would have exactly 0 followers if I joined a new network right now.
Yeah, it's also something to think about. I mean, for Camelot, we're trying to, I'm currently, one of my projects right now is I'm trying to come up with what are the tools that I use on a daily basis that we could integrate into this app that could make people more productive and make it one hub for everyone, right? But then I'm also thinking about, well, when we integrate like a timer feature for timing the Pomodoro technique, like why would people switch from Forest to our app? If we integrate social reading, why would people switch from Goodreads to our app? And it's just hard to create a system for that, because it's always going to be more difficult to migrate from one app to another than it is to just stay on the one app. It's just basic laziness.
You did also mention the requirement that your app has to be 9 times better than the current one in order for somebody to switch, right? So
yeah.
And I guess also speaking on the investment topic from earlier, I think it reminds me a lot of the case study that he did with the Bible app, and how the more people put into it, the more they'll want to get out of it. And I think it just depends a lot on the context, because in the case of like religion, it might be easier to form these habits that other people are also going to be following, and it might be harder to do so with something like a Judo app or something along those lines. So I guess that's also something to consider.
I think an interesting thing to think about is if you're building an app that integrates with people's existing habits, right? So say that there's just a weird example is like these pages that these apps that'll say, hey, X amount of people viewed your Instagram profile, right? Well, people already have this habit of checking Instagram. So how hard is it to add in this second component to an existing habit that people have? And would that be easier than creating a habit from scratch?
So I don't know if any of you guys have read Atomic Habits, it's different than this, but it's also about habit forming, but in just like your like daily routines more so, not about like using it for necessarily applications, but like personally, like, oh, I want to start flossing every day because I don't do that. Like, how am I going to be able to do that? Which I do. I do floss every day now because I built the habit. But in that book, he does actually say that it's much easier to, like, one of the ways that you can introduce a habit is by building it into something that already exists. So like, if you have like a morning routine and you know that you do certain things in a certain order, maybe taking the example of flossing, you're like, well, I brush my teeth anyways, I'm going to floss right before that, or in between doing once I get out of the shower, I'm going to floss and then I'm going to brush my teeth. And if you have it kind of like integrated within those habits, it's a lot easier to pick it up and put it into that environment than just starting it from scratch, basically.
Yeah, I think that's especially true if the reward isn't immediate. In your case of flossing, it's not something that makes you feel better or gives you a dopamine hit, but you kind of have to use your higher level mind to justify the reward, because there isn't a monkey mind reward, so to speak. So those ones are harder to form.
So the next point, is there any way to get back to applications to build somewhat habit-forming applications? Is there, sounds like you're proposing to tie the two ideas together. Can you make your application tie into something that already exists? Like if you're already going to check Instagram viewers anyways, can you tag your own application? Can we tag Penn University onto something that people already do in their normal life? That's kind of what you're getting at, right?
Yeah. And I was commenting, like Colin was saying, are we good? Like, can we integrate our app into these other ones to make it more, and will that like be easier to build a habit? I definitely think that that's true, because you already, like, the trigger can kind of come from a different place. It doesn't necessarily have to come from your application, but then that trigger can lead to the behavior that you want within your app, possibly.
I mean, honestly, I couldn't see this with, I don't know how to explain it well, but I can kind of understand this with Penn University. I mean, the reason I check Penn University so often is because, well, I open up Slack to go check work stuff or the Nashville EC Slack, and then I see, oh, there's an unread message in Penn U. Let's hop in there and see what's happening.
We're totally riding on the habit-forming nature of Slack.
Yeah.
I thought about that specifically when reading this book. It's like, oh, that little red dot.
Mm-hmm. And so that actually ties into the next question that I had, which is if you personally are building a product or service that you think can take advantage of the hooked model, how has this changed your view on it? How do you think you're going to move forward from this and begin implementing it?
I like this topic. So if we're all in the doc, like all my notes were basically showing that I was thinking about that, wasn't reading through the book, listening to the book. And let's see, I'll go quickly through this because I'm interested in Collins and George. You got to start it too, don't you? Yeah, so maybe all of us. But the trigger action variable reward investment, I think we have chunks of that potentially in Penn University, but we have chunks that are missing. So the action is engaging in a chat. The action is writing like your quick thank you follow up. The reward is the knowledge that you receive, the social connections that we're making right now. The investment is just knowing that as we're doing this stuff, we're building up when you build up social relationships, that is an investment that you can lean into later. One thing that the book kind of points out though is we don't have much in the way of triggers at Penn University. We are totally relying upon Slack, the little red dot, basically saying, oh, there's something maybe interesting, unread, to pull people back into it. And without really framing it in terms of triggers, that is actually what we're building right now at the university. Like soon you will have access to all of your Penny chats that you involved with in the past. Like this will be one of them, and we'll all be kind of stuck on there. And whenever you get, just like you did see for this meeting, you'll get a trigger that says that the meeting's about to happen, remember to participate. But we're going to start, like, we need to be careful. I don't want to be annoying, but we're going to start hanging other types of triggers off that. Like, how did the meeting go? Remember to, click this and you can fill out your, say thank you and tell us what you learned, something like that. Yeah. So we'll be exploring that in the future, and that directly ties into some of the things I guess I learned from the book.
I think for me, like, I had been thinking about these things, like, oh, how do I pull people into the app and stuff? But the book provides like a way to systematize it and like make it like have a very clear path of like, okay, like we want to think about the trigger that and what action we want to like be like what action we want to lead to from that trigger, and then how that invests people back into the app. And so it creates just like a nice system to follow, and to also be able to like analyze whether the work that we're doing is actually working, as far as like triggers leading to actions, where before it's kind of just like random brainstorming. But this actually like gave me ideas to set up specific user stories and how I want people to like interact with the application and stuff like that.
I guess for me, answering that question, how will I incorporate this into the hook? Incorporate hooked into what I'm building. So we're building, or we've built software for the business events space. So these events, people travel every year. They travel to these business events to do networking, to network with other people. And nobody's able to do that right now. So we've built a piece of software that allows that to happen in the browser. And some of what stuck out to me in this regard, I'm going to read you a sentence. It says, variability spikes activity in the nucleus accumbens. He was talking about an experiment with pigeons where they would peck a disc when they were hungry and they received food. And then when he changed it where they pecked it, and sometimes it gave food and sometimes not, they ended up pecking more frequently. He goes on to talk about giving a user agency over something that is inherently variable is one way that you can create a hook. And so thinking about the user experience of our product, in how they search and discover people to network with, giving them some more control over that. Some people that try to replicate networking on the browser just randomly put two people together in a video chat. It's not, you don't have much control over it, and you don't get a lot of value out of it. So figuring out ways we can give the user more agency to work the room, so to speak, and search of the other attendees and learn a little bit about them, and give them some control over something that's inherently variable, as he describes, that can create a hook. And hopefully they'll enjoy using the product, and that might even be kind of fun. So that's how I'm planning to incorporate it.
It's kind of like throughout human history, fishing has kind of had this behavior. You toss your line in the water, and sometimes you get fish, sometimes you get nothing. But there's kind of that hunting type nature there to engaging with a new platform. You've got to have enough threshold of value coming out. You have to actually meet some people, and ideally that first person you meet is of value. But then it doesn't have to be absolutely consistent. Like social network by its nature is you're going to have some discussions that are on fire and some that are just okay.
That's an interesting and good analogy about fishing and hunting. And I had the same thought process come up before this call about, networking is kind of a blend of fishing and hunting. And so in real life and when you try to recreate it online. And so it's an interesting and difficult problem to solve. So I don't know where the hooks will be, but.
By the way, quick warning, I'm going to pop off at 15 till.
Okay. So the next question that I had was, since we went over the more businessy side of things, how do you integrate it into your product? Do you think it's possible to take this model and throw it into your actual real life? How can you force yourself to build these habits in the same sort of fashion with basic stuff like maybe drinking more water or doing more exercise or something like that? How can you find ways to sort of do these triggers, find these variable rewards in life to help yourself build these habits?
I guess I'll jump in on that one. I also have to go at 15 till, but want to hear everybody's answers. I think for me, one thing that I've really learned and struggled with in the past, but getting better at, is if you're trying to build a habit, you can't forget about the reward portion. And like to your point about exercising, and other things. Sometimes you got to give yourself a reward, whether it's a little treat or anything, whatever you think is a reward. You do have to build that into your schedule. I'm so hot and cold, sometimes I'll try to just go cold turkey and never give myself any reward, get rid of all the junk food. And sometimes you got to remember that you have to reward yourself for doing the behavior, and that can really help lock the behavior in. So
yeah, it's funny. That's like the part that I struggle with too. Like when for whatever reason, that's the always, I guess the thing I always forget about, partially because like a lot of the habits maybe that you might want to build are removing a negative behavior. But that negative behavior might like
it feels good.
provide, yeah, exactly. It's like a great reward. So like,
and you need reward. It's such an
challenging.
important part of the hook. And we try to make ourselves exercise or eat healthy, and there's no reward, like you say. You need some kind of short-term immediate reward, and I think that helps you stick with the habits longer. So like mine is a single cup of coffee with cream in it. I love that, and that's my reward for working out. So
I guess I can jump in. I've been watching a decent amount of like productivity videos too. So I have been struggling with productivity recently, just because I haven't had that much of a structured work schedule since summer started. But yeah, like I would agree with everything you guys said so far. Um, the one part about like giving yourself a reward is very important. Um, and yeah, just having to needing to repeat things in order to get that habit going is very important. I actually recently am trying out the Fitbod app that he's talking about, just because I've been wanting to figure out some way to work out, but it's hard to like get myself to uh, stick to my own schedule. So it's better for somebody else to basically tell me what to do and just sort of like follow that. Um, so I guess that's a way I'm going to try to incorporate the hook model into my life. But yeah, I think that and like just thinking about variable rewards, thinking about rewards in general, making sure they're there, that I'm consciously thinking about them, um, and yeah, using that in order to figure out how to do things is going to be something that I pay attention to from now, I think.
I think a lot of stuff in the book that's presumptively applied to a startup really applies to, this is a Colin's question. It applies for ourselves too. So like, just looking back at the list of stuff I've jotted down, trigger action, variable reward investment. Well, if you can make sure the trigger happens for good habits, make sure the trigger doesn't happen for bad habits. Stay away from people that pull you into certain situations, stuff like that. That's good. Variable reward, I think there's probably ways that you can make good habits more rewarding and bad habits less rewarding. George's idea of like just make sure you give yourself a reward to something that is fundamentally not rewarding at first, so that you can at least kind of tie the two together. Eat a little piece of chocolate. The other thing that motivates people differently, but I'm a very social creature, so if I can ever pull anyone else into a habit that I want to build or habit that I want to break, then just the social pressure of having to explain why I have done something or why I have not done something that's helpful for me. So
yeah, accountability is huge, and I think that's going to help you out a lot, Shaw. Accountability to other people for those difficult habits. Nick, maybe with your flossing, you said you don't have a problem with that, but if you're maybe a significant other could hold you accountable for something like that. But yeah, social proof and accountability is big.
Yeah, I noticed that in an online community I run, we have a big focus on accountability, and our community has actually gotten into a good habit about basically every morning, there's a few people that'll send their like entire daily checklist basically, and then they'll do like a midday update and an end of day update, and then everyone basically just hypes them up the entire day, and then I'll notice that on days where there's not as much hype or not as much conversation, like on the weekends and stuff, their checklist is usually a lot less complete. But then during the week and like when people are there just being like, good job, you got this, they're basically, their entire task list is tackled by midday.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Colin. Daily stand-ups is a very important part of our routine. A lot of other successful startups and companies, whether it's in the morning, afternoon, or whatever, but stand-ups short, they can create that little accountability on a daily basis that helps people stay focused. So
here's a question I have though for daily stand-ups. So at my company, we do like tri-weekly stand-ups. We do it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Have you ever found that, because you know, when in part of the hook model, they say doing the action has to be easier than doing nothing, right? Have you ever noticed people like basically not being as engaged because it happens every day and it's not like a variable thing anymore?
yes, I think, and sometimes people can feel like they have to say something or they kind of fake productivity. The way I get around that, and I do stand up every day because we have different people working on different things, but I think that 3 times a week can be good. But sometimes you have to, on your stand up, say, today's just a lazy day. I'm not really very, very productive. You kind of have to put that into your culture. Otherwise, like you say, people will just spout out some nonsense that makes it seem like they're working towards something, even though maybe they're really not. Because like you say, every day, we're not machines. We can't be productive every single day. So I think you have to be honest when you're not feeling productive or you're not feeling very focused, and that can help people avoid burnout with the stand-ups. Because some people, they know the purpose of them, so they can, even if they're not working productively, they'll make up something,
Yeah, I've seen
Not
that
sure if that
happen.
answered your question or not, but
I've seen we will ask our developers, we'll be like, hey, how long is this XYZ going to take? And they'll just be like, oh, I can get it done in a day. And then it's like 4 days later and it's not
is
done.
that day today or someday in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I gotta head out. If you got a chance, say thank you to Colin by writing a quick follow up in the forum, and I'm gonna do a little bit of that later today.
Yep. I will be sure to, I'll make a forum post, and then I will also, I'm recording this, I'll upload it to YouTube too for you guys.
Fantastic, thank you. Thanks a lot for organizing this, and I wish I could stay a little bit longer. See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye, John.
So
Thanks, Colin.
I guess as we wrap this up, the last thing I had was, and Nick already started this, does anyone else have any book recommendations on a similar topic? So whether it's habit building, product building, some kind of design concept, anything sort of business related you think you could tie in, shoot it. We got, Nick already suggested Atomic Habits as a comment. And if you want to dive into that more, Nick, feel free.
Yeah. So yeah, Atomic Habits was what I was mentioning earlier. It's by James Clear. And you can also look at his website. I think it's just jamesclear.com. And so you can read some of his articles first. But that's a really great book about more building personal habits. And he has basically the same model, but a little bit different terminology for building in habits. And he goes into like the different things that you need to change, like about your environment or about the rewards that you're getting. And there's some really interesting like tactics that you can apply. And it's similar to this one where there's action steps. I think there's like some worksheets he might provide too, and it's a great way to look at that habit building.
Yeah, I know I've seen a lot of videos talking about Atomic Habits. I've seen a lot of people in my online communities talk about it. And it seems like basically just one of those like boilerplate books for if you're like for self-development.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll say a book that I know of that's sort of similar it's not necessarily on habit building, but it is on gamification and how to basically improve your users' lives through these gamification concepts that Hook talks about a little bit. It's a longer book, but it's called Actionable Gamification. And it's basically this guy whose Yu-Kai Chow, and he spent his life from like when he was a teenager, basically trying to figure out, why do games work so well? How do they hook me in? And why do I keep coming back to playing Diablo every night, right? And so he built this framework that he calls Octalysis, which he calls 8 different core drives on what gamification basically is, right? So if I pull up, there's a interesting chart here of the 8 core drives in this octagon format. And so it starts out with like meaning. So it's like, I would say that's sort of like the investment, right? It's like, why do I want to do this, right? Then you've got empowerment, which you could compare to variable reward, and then social influence, unpredictability, all that kind of stuff. And he also has some separation between sort of like more positive gamification habits versus more malicious ones. And so it's a very interesting read if you're thinking about how you can gamify life, and how can you gamify a product.
Colin, could you drop those in the chat? I'd like to check those out.
Yeah, I'm actually
That
going
book.
to
In the Slack or wherever.
I'm gonna make it. I'll be sure to include it on the Google groups too, but I'm gonna just comment it here before I forget.
It's good talking to you folks. Look forward to the next one.
Yep, I think this is about it. Does anyone else have any extra comments they want to throw out or questions? All right, it was great talking to you guys as well.
Until
Thanks
next
for
time.
setting it up.
I'm gonna go on the hunt for another book we might be able to do for next month.
Cool, man.
Sounds good.
See you guys.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.